Rimuru x Arifureta. Fragments of Soul to be the Strongest by Rimu_Kai. Chapter 24 Class between Strongest Dragon and New Plot. The air within the labyrinth was thick with the stench of blood, burnt flesh, and the raw, lingering traces of mana that crackled and pulsed through the ruined battlefield like a silent storm of death. The once beautifully carved stone walls of the dungeon floor now nothing more than shattered debris, cracks running deep along the towering pillars that barely supported the ceiling above, glowing veins of eerie blue magic illuminating the surroundings with an otherworldly glow, casting long shadows across the broken terrain where corpses of monstrous abominations lay in twisted heaps, their bodies torn apart by the merciless battle that had raged without end. Amidst the carnage stood Aurora, her form bloodied but unyielding, her sharp purple eyes burning with defiance even as her body trembled under the sheer strain of her battle, the protective barrier cast upon her by Rimuru flickering weakly as she struggled to maintain her stance, her claws twitching at her sides, her once pristine demonic attire now torn and barely holding together, a testament to the relentless assault she had endured against Catalya's monstrous horde. Yet, despite her overwhelming exhaustion, despite the way her legs nearly gave out beneath her, she refused to fall. Nearby, Kuki Amanogawa, the so-called hero, clutched his holy sword tightly, his normally radiant silver armor now dirtied with grime and blood, his expression twisted in frustration, anger, and the bitter taste of helplessness as he watched the battle unfold before him, his pride screaming at him to fight, yet his body refusing to move after the overwhelming display of power from their enemies. Beside him, Suzu Taniguchi, despite her normally cheerful nature, had her fists clenched tightly, her lips trembling as she barely suppressed her fear, while Eri Nakamura, her dark, calculating eyes darting back and forth, silently analyzed the battlefield, her mind working through possibilities that could turn the situation to her favor, though even she could not deny the overwhelming despair that loomed over them. Standing a short distance away, Daisuke Hayama was frozen in place, his face pale as he held his trembling hands close to his chest, his mind racing with panic as he watched the ever-growing destruction unfold, his cowardice screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything other than stand there like the pathetic worm he was. But his body refused to obey, rooted in place by sheer terror. Ryotaro Sakagami, meanwhile, stood beside him, his large frame hunched as he protectively cradled Rari's lifeless body in his arms, the weight of her death pressing down on him like an unbearable burden, his hands clenched so tightly around her motionless form that his knuckles had gone white, his normally strong and unshakable spirit now drowning in grief. On the opposite side of the battlefield, Catalya, the voluptuous demon general, smirked as she observed the despair written across the faces of the so-called heroes, her confidence unwavering as she leaned lazily against one of her monstrous creations, her eyes gleaming with amusement, while Lilora, the dragon-horned warrior, stood beside her, her piercing gaze locked onto Aurora with a mixture of respect and annoyance, as if acknowledging her strength while simultaneously being irritated that she had lasted this long. And then there was Belzar, a hulking monstrosity of a demon, his grotesque form towering over the battlefield like an executioner standing before the condemned, his dark armor stained with Aurora's blood, his cruel eyes glowing with sadistic delight as he lifted his massive fist, preparing to bring it down upon the exhausted demoness who had dared to stand against him. Boom! In an instant, the ceiling shattered, an explosion of debris raining down as a figure descended from the darkness above, moving faster than the eye could follow, and before anyone could even process what had happened. Crack! Belzar's massive frame was sent flying, his entire body twisting unnaturally midair as he was launched like a cannonball across the battlefield, his form slamming into the far wall with such brutal force that the entire dungeon seemed to shake, the very ground beneath them trembling under the sheer impact, a spiderweb of deep cracks spreading across the stone as chunks of rubble collapsed around his now half-buried form. A suffocating silence followed, the sheer intensity of the blow leaving everyone stunned, their wide eyes locked onto the settling dust, their minds struggling to comprehend what had just occurred, their breaths caught in their throats as the presence of someone, filled the air with an overwhelming, suffocating aura. And then, two more figures dropped down from the rooftop, their forms shrouded in dust and mystery, their identities hidden from sight as they stood in eerie silence, their very existence exuding an unnatural weight that sent an involuntary shiver down the spines of those who still remained conscious. "Hey guys! I brought help." Endo, the timid yet now triumphant classmate, rushed forward with an expression of barely contained excitement, his normally nervous demeanor replaced with one of relief as he practically beamed at the confused and battered students, his voice carrying a newfound confidence as he spoke. Who did you bring?" Suzu stammered, her eyes flickering between the mysterious figures and Endo, her body still tense with the lingering fear of battle. Endo grinned, almost mischievously, his voice practically dripping with satisfaction as he answered. "You'll see." And then, a voice echoed from within the dust, smooth, cold, and laced with undeniable confidence. "Looks like we arrived at the perfect time." The dust parted. And from within it, a man stepped forward, his form unrecognizable to those who had once known him, his black coat flowing behind him as his now silver-white hair gleamed under the eerie glow of the dungeon, his golden-red eyes cold and piercing as they scanned the battlefield with an almost detached indifference, his very presence exuding an overwhelming dominance that sent a ripple of unease through those who once believed themselves superior. "Who the hell are you?" Kuki demanded, his voice filled with suspicion, a scowl twisting his features as he instinctively raised his sword. Endo, however, only chuckled, his grin widening as he delivered the truth. "It's Hajime." A moment of stunned silence followed. And then, Hajime, Kaori's breath hitched, her eyes widening as tears welled up at the edges, her body trembling with overwhelming relief, her heart hammering against her ribs as she desperately wanted to rush forward, to throw herself into his arms, to finally confirm with her own hands that the boy she had longed to see again was truly standing before her, but her body was too weak, too battered to move, leaving her helpless to do anything but whisper his name like a fragile prayer. Meanwhile, Daisuke Hayama paled, his body visibly tensing as sweat dripped down his brow, his mind reeling with panic as his lips twisted into a nervous sneer. "That's not Nagumo," he shouted, his voice laced with barely concealed terror, his guilt manifesting as blatant denial. Endo, however, merely sighed, shaking his head in amusement. "Oh, I checked his status plate," he said simply, his tone almost teasing. "It's definitely Hajime." The reactions were immediate. Kuki's scowl deepened, Suzu bit her lip, Eri's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion, and Ryotaro stayed silent, unwilling to voice his thoughts. And then, Hajime's lips curled into a small smirk, his golden-red eyes softening slightly as he turned towards Kaori, his voice gentle, yet unshakably firm. "Kaori," he murmured, stepping forward, "if you really believe it's me, then say it." And Kaori, despite her exhaustion, despite the pain, smiled through her tears. "Hajime, it's really you." And then, Hajime turned to the second figure still kneeling amidst the dust. "Oya? That's my elder brother, Rimuru." And as the dust fully settled, the battlefield fell into absolute silence as they beheld the sight before them. Rimuru knelt upon the shattered ground, holding the bloodied form of Aurora in his arms. Rimuru rose from his kneeling position, his crimson eyes burning with fury, locking onto the trio before him, Catalya, Belzar, and Lilora. The sheer pressure of his gaze alone making the air feel suffocating, his aura thick with barely restrained rage, a predator assessing its prey before the inevitable slaughter. Catalya's eyes widened in recognition as she took a step back, realization dawning upon her like a cruel joke played by fate itself. The name Aurora had whispered before, the master she had spoken of with such reverence and devotion, was none other than the monster before her, the being radiating a presence far beyond anything she had ever encountered, an existence that could not be compared to mere demons, nor even to the most powerful of their kind. "So you," Catalya began, her voice wavering, her composure slipping as she forced herself to meet Rimuru's gaze, a deep sense of foreboding washing over her, "are the master Aurora spoke of." Rimuru tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable, his crimson eyes glowing brighter, his voice like a blade of ice cutting through the tension in the air. "And what of it?" Catalya hesitated, but Belzar scoffed, stepping forward with an arrogant sneer, his muscular form exuding confidence despite the overwhelming presence before him. "Ha! So what if you're her master? That weakling couldn't even stand against us. What makes you think you'll be any different?" Rimuru's lips curled into something resembling a smirk, though it held no amusement, Only disdain, only the promise of suffering yet to come. Is that so? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the battlefield like a death knell. You must be quite proud of yourselves, attacking something that belongs to me. Lilora, watching the exchange with sharp eyes, suddenly let out a low chuckle, drawing attention to herself as she tilted her head slightly, golden eyes gleaming with curiosity. So it's you. I was wondering what kind of master could make that proud demoness submit so completely, she mused, her expression unreadable as she gazed at Rimuru. Then she smirked. And now that I see you up close, a dragon, huh? Rimuru's expression shifted, ever so slightly, his eyes narrowing. Excuse me? Lilora crossed her arms, her smirk widening as she observed him, her tone almost playful but laced with something more profound. You're a dragon, just like me. Silence fell upon the battlefield for a brief moment, then. What? Kuki's voice shattered the quiet, his disbelief evident as he took a step forward, his brows furrowing, his frustration clear. That's ridiculous. He's human. There's no way of hell he could be a dragon. The others reacted almost immediately. Kaori's expression twisted in confusion, Suzu and Ryotaro shared uncertain glances. Endo remained silent but tense, and Daisuke looked as if he wanted to disappear, his fear growing by the second. Sweat dripping down his forehead as his mind raced with the terrifying possibility that Rimuru would find out what he had done. Rimuru, however, ignored them all, his gaze locked onto Lilora, his voice devoid of emotion. And if I am, what of it? Lilora's smirk remained, but there was something in her gaze, something calculating, something challenging. Just wondering why a proud dragon would lower himself to protect a human, she said, tilting her head, as if mocking him. A sharp, biting cold filled the air. You have a death wish. Rimuru's voice was softer now, more dangerous, a quiet storm before destruction. Lilora grinned, stepping forward, her black aura flaring around her like an infernal blaze, her presence heavy enough to make the weaker one stagger. And if I do? She taunted, golden eyes gleaming with something primal, something eager. Besides, I am the strongest dragon currently alive. What could you possibly do to me? Rimuru's expression didn't change. If anything, his twisted smile widened as his red eyes gleamed with something dark, something unrestrained. Tell me, he whispered, his voice sending chills down the spines of everyone present, who injured Aurora. You, or the woman behind you. Lilora chuckled, her pride evident. I did. A breath of silence. Then, I see. His red eyes glowed, burning with something far beyond anger, something far beyond mere hatred, something monstrous. You dare to break what's mine. A suffocating pressure exploded from Rimuru's body, the very air trembling, the very ground beneath them cracking, his rage manifesting in waves of raw, unfiltered bloodlust, an aura so terrifying, so all-consuming, that even the strongest of them instinctively took a step back, their instinct screaming at them to run, to flee, to escape before it was too late. Lilora, however, merely grinned, her own aura flaring even brighter, dark tendrils of power coiling around her form, shaking the space itself as she stepped forward, her presence almost matching his, her voice dripping with anticipation. Oh, angry, are we? Her black aura surged violently, consuming everything around her in a whirlwind of chaos and destruction, the very air darkening, the very ground beneath her feet quaking. Come at me, then, she challenged, her grin widening, her golden eyes burning with primal excitement. Show me that you can keep your words. Meanwhile, Hajime stepped forward, his crimson eyes sharp as they locked onto Belzar, his grip tightening around his gun as he tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering in his gaze. Belzar sneered. A mere human wants to fight me. His voice was filled with condescension, but there was also an undercurrent of frustration. I understand that I'm not as strong as that dragon bitch over there, but against you, I can kill you easily. Bang! A bullet whizzed past Belzar's ear, so close that he could feel the heat, a thin line of blood dripping down the side of his face, his entire body freezing as he processed what had just happened. Hajime smirked, his golden eyes gleaming with sadistic amusement. Then prove it, big talk. The battlefield fell silent. Then, Kuki's outraged voice broke through. What the hell is that? A gun? In this world? His face twisted in disbelief, his pride wounded, his frustration palpable. Suzu gasped. What kind of magic is that? Eri's eyes widened slightly, but a cruel smirk formed on her lips, intrigue flashing in her gaze. Ryutaro whistled, impressed. Well, damn. Daisuke, however, felt his entire body tremble, his breath hitching as his fear only grew stronger. Belzar's expression twisted in fury, his red aura flaring wildly, his entire body radiating unrestrained anger. You dare? He roared, his rage shaking the air, his presence growing heavier. I'll crush you, you arrogant little. Hajime merely grinned. Yeah, keep talking. Belzar's aura surged violently, a blood-red storm of power, his killing intent aimed directly at Hajime, but the boy didn't flinch, didn't waver, he merely raised his gun, his smirk widening. The two brothers stood side by side, their eyes locked onto their respective opponents, their energies coiling like living entities around them, an unspoken understanding passing between them as the world trembled in anticipation of the bloodshed to come. Kaori, Suzu, and the others could only watch, their breaths stolen by the sheer intensity of the scene, their emotions a chaotic whirlwind of awe, fear, and uncertainty. Daisuke, trembling, could only pray that they never found out what he had done. And Kuki hated this. He hated that he was being rescued by the two people he despised the most. Hajime glanced at Rimuru. Then let's begin, shall we? Rimuru's red eyes gleamed, his voice a promise of destruction. Absolutely. The atmosphere shifted as the battlefield braced itself for something beyond mortal comprehension. A red aura flared violently from Hajime, its intensity crackling through the air, thick with a monstrous, demonic presence. It was not just power, it was the manifestation of something far more terrifying, something unnatural, something forged through suffering and survival. Meanwhile, Rimuru's aura erupted, swallowing the battlefield in an overwhelming force that sent tremors through the very fabric of reality. His presence was suffocating, a swirling vortex of purple, red, and black, the perfect embodiment of three existences, a monster, a demon, and a dragon. His very being resonated with destruction itself, and for the first time, true dread crept into Lilora's golden eyes. Yet, her lips curled into an eager grin. The strongest dragon alive had finally found a battle worthy of her strength. Interesting, she breathed, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with the raw thrill of combat. Her draconic instincts flared to life, every fiber of her being urging her to clash with the entity before her. Hajime's crimson gaze locked onto Belzar, the towering demon still sneering despite the unease creeping into his expression. Though Hajime's aura wasn't as overwhelming, it was still strong, almost equal to his own. Belzar clicked his tongue in irritation, his pride refusing to acknowledge the human standing before him. HMPH. You think that flimsy power of yours can compare to me? Hajime's smirk widened. You're welcome to try me, big guy. Belzar's sneer twisted into a scowl. Insolent little pest. His words cut off as the air cracked like glass. A pressure unlike anything they had ever felt before descended upon them. Kaori's breath hitched, her hands tightening as she struggled to remain composed. This isn't normal. Suzu shivered. Is this really something we can survive? Eri's smirk wavered for the first time, a shadow of unease flickering in her sharp gaze. Ryutaro, still holding Rari's lifeless body, clenched his jaw. Even with them here, I don't know if we're getting out of this alive. Daisuke, meanwhile, could no longer hide his fear. His body trembled violently, sweat pouring down his face as his breath came out in panicked gasps. He knew what Rimuru was. He knew what he was capable of. And he knew that if Rimuru ever learned of his betrayal, he wouldn't just die, he'd cease to exist. Kuki's face twisted in frustration, his fists clenched at his sides. He hated it. He hated this. Hated that he was forced to rely on them, on him. He was supposed to be the hero. He was supposed to be the one saving everyone. But now he was nothing more than a spectator, watching as monsters fought in his place. Catalya, barely holding herself upright, gasped as her gaze landed on her fallen bird, its lifeless body motionless on the ground. A strangled noise escaped her lips, her eyes burning with pain and anger. Aurora was right. This man, this beast, was something beyond reason. She looked up at Rimuru, her hands trembling. What was he? But before she could dwell on it further, boom, a shockwave exploded through the dungeon floor as Rimuru and Lilora vanished. Their speed shattered the ground beneath them, their movements warping the space itself as they clashed midair, fist against fist, claw against blade, power against power. Lilora's golden eyes gleamed as she met Rimuru's strike head-on, the sheer force of their collision igniting a storm of energy that sent cracks racing through the dungeon walls. The floor beneath them trembled as their clash sent shockwaves rippling outward, throwing debris into the air like a hurricane of destruction. "You're holding back," Lilora growled, her grin widening as she twisted midair, her tail whipping around to strike at Rimuru's side. Rimuru tilted his head slightly, his crimson gaze cold and unbothered. He didn't dodge. He didn't flinch. He let the attack land. Crack. The impact sent shockwaves through his body, yet he remained still, unscathed, his twisted smirk never faltering. Lilora's eyes narrowed, the thrill of battle surging through her veins. Oh, not bad. Without warning, a clawed hand shot forward. Lilora's instinct screamed, but it was too late. Slash. A streak of black lightning ripped through the air, tearing straight through Lilora's shoulder. Blood splattered across the battlefield. Lilora hissed, her gaze burning with something primal. Pain. No. Excitement. You. Her voice was barely a whisper, her golden eyes gleaming as she grinned, her teeth bared in exhilaration. You're really something. Rimuru didn't respond. Instead, his crimson aura flared violently, merging with his black and purple energy, twisting into a vortex of destruction that crackled with an unnatural force. The very air around him distorted, reality itself trembling beneath his sheer presence. Lilora's heart pounded. This was it. This was the fight she had been waiting for. Without hesitation, she let loose a deafening roar. The dungeon walls shattered. The ceiling above them crumbled. And in the next instant, they charged. Fists collided. Magic erupted. Space twisted. The battle was nothing short of cataclysmic. Each strike sent shockwaves rippling through the air, the very floor beneath them disintegrating with each clash. The dungeon itself groaned under the weight of their battle, the very foundation cracking, breaking, collapsing. And yet, they didn't stop. Lilora swung her clawed hand. Rimuru caught it. Lilora unleashed a wave of draconic energy. Rimuru devoured it. Lilora's eyes widened. What the? Rimuru's lips curled into a smirk, his voice a whisper of death. You're fun, he murmured. And then, he vanished. A sharp, biting cold filled the air. Lilora's instincts flared, but too slow. Crack. A fist slammed into her gut, sending her rocketing through the collapsing dungeon, her body smashing through walls and debris, the sheer force of the impact leaving a crater in her wake. Lilora coughed, grinning through the pain. Not bad, she rasped, golden eyes burning. But before she could rise, a gunshot shattered the moment. The battle between Hajime and Belzar had begun. The battlefield trembled beneath the sheer force of power being unleashed. On one side stood Hajime Nagumo, his golden eyes gleaming with cold determination, his red aura flaring wildly as if it were alive, the embodiment of a monster and a demon. Opposing him was Belzar, a towering behemoth of muscle and power, his blood-red aura surging like a violent storm, his confidence unshaken despite Hajime's defiance. The moment their auras clashed, the very air between them crackled, distortions forming in space itself from the sheer intensity. Hajime's grip tightened around Donner and Schlag as he smirked, the barrel of his guns aimed straight at Belzar's head. "TCH, you really think a human like you can stand against me?" Belzar sneered, his crimson eyes filled with contempt. His voice boomed across the battlefield, shaking the remaining structures of the dungeon floor they stood upon. "Your power is nothing but an imitation of a true monster. You will never reach my level." Hajime chuckled darkly, unfazed by the insult. "You're not the first arrogant bastard I've put down," he said, shifting his stance. "And you sure as hell won't be the last." Before Belzar could react, Hajime pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. The explosive force of the bullets tore through the air at speeds too fast for the eye to follow. The specially enchanted bullets, infused with anti-magic properties, were designed to pierce even the toughest of defenses. Belzar barely managed to react in time. His body twisted unnaturally as he dodged the first two bullets, but the third grazed his cheek, leaving a thin crimson line. His expression darkened. "Artifacts. You dare to use such a pathetic weapon against me?" Belzar roared, his aura surging. With a single stomp, the ground beneath him shattered. In the blink of an eye, he lunged at Hajime, his monstrous speed creating a shockwave that sent debris flying in all directions. Hajime, anticipating the attack, activated aerodynamic and grand evasion simultaneously, his movements becoming a blur. He sidestepped just as Belzar's fist crashed into the ground where he had been standing, causing a massive explosion of force. The impact left a deep crater, but Hajime was already repositioning. With lightning-fast reflexes, he swapped out his revolvers for Metzele, a massive railgun-like sniper rifle, and took aim in midair. Eat this! A deafening boom erupted as a massive, armor-piercing round tore through the space between them. The bullet was too fast, too powerful. Belzar barely had time to register the attack before the round struck him dead center in the chest. A shockwave of sheer force rippled outward as the projectile collided with Belzar's powerful body, sending him flying backward, crashing through stone pillars and shattering them upon impact. Smoke and dust filled the air. But before Hajime could capitalize on his attack, a sinister chuckle echoed through the battlefield. "Not bad, human," Belzar muttered, his voice growing more distorted. As the smoke cleared, Hajime's eyes narrowed. Belzar stood, his massive form covered in cracks, blood dripping from his wounds, but he was grinning. "You actually managed to hurt me," Belzar admitted. "I should kill you just for that." Then his aura exploded. A wave of pure malice surged forward, the very ground crumbling under the pressure. A dark energy coiled around him, his veins pulsing with unholy power. "But you're still nothing compared to me." With a single step, Belzar was in front of Hajime. Hajime barely had time to react before Belzar's fist slammed into his midsection, sending him flying like a cannonball. He crashed through multiple stone formations before slamming into the far wall of the dungeon, the impact leaving deep fractures in the ancient stone. Blood trickled from the corner of Hajime's mouth, but he merely grinned. "Not bad, but you hit like a bitch." Before Belzar could respond, Hajime's entire form flickered. Teleportation. Belzar's instinct screamed at him as Hajime reappeared above him, this time wielding Orkan, a massive grenade launcher. "Time to test my new explosive rounds." A barrage of explosive shells rained down upon Belzar in rapid succession. Each detonation was powerful enough to level a small fortress, and the sheer force sent shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The dungeon floor quaked violently, massive chunks of debris flying everywhere. But even as the dust settled, Belzar stood tall. His armor was cracked, his body damaged, but his power only grew. "You're beginning to piss me off, human," he growled, flexing his massive arms. "Fine. No more playing around." Belzar raised both of his hands. The very air trembled. A massive crimson energy sphere formed between his palms, crackling with chaotic magic. The sheer scale of it dwarfed Hajime's previous attacks. It was enough power to obliterate the entire dungeon floor. "Let's see if your pathetic tricks can save you from this." Belzar roared as he launched the devastating attack. Hajime's pupils contracted. He had no time to dodge. But he didn't need to. With a smirk, he activated Limit Break, pushing his body beyond its limits. At the same time, he pulled out Schlagen, a weapon designed for absolute destruction. A surge of pure mana condensed into the barrel of the massive firearm, the blue energy coalescing into a single, devastating shot. "Try surviving this, bastard." The two attacks collided. An earth-shattering explosion erupted, consuming the entire battlefield in a storm of destruction. The resulting impact sent shockwaves that tore through stone and steel alike, leaving nothing but obliterated ruins in its wake. The dust settled. Both warriors stood, panting. Belzar's armor was shattered, his body bloodied, but he refused to fall. Hajime, bruised and battered, simply grinned. "Damn, you're tough," Hajime admitted, wiping blood from his lips. Belzar chuckled, "Despite his injuries, and you're insane." Both combatants smirked. Neither had won, not yet. Meanwhile, the battle between Rimuru and Lilora continued in the distance. Lilora, the so-called strongest dragon, grinned wildly as she clashed against Rimuru, their blows shaking the very fabric of space itself. Her claws, coated in an abyssal black flame, clashed against Rimuru's blade, the impact creating shockwaves powerful enough to carve deep trenches into the dungeon floor. Rimuru, his crimson eyes gleaming with pure, unrestrained killing intent, countered her every move with cold efficiency. His blade distorted reality itself with each swing, his aura, a fusion of dragon, demon, and monster, engulfing the battlefield in sheer chaos. Lilaura licked her lips, golden eyes glowing with exhilaration. "Oh, you really are something else." Rimuru's smirk was cold. "You haven't seen anything yet. The battle was far from over." The battlefield trembled violently as Rimuru and Lilaura's battle escalated. Each clash of their blows sent shockwaves through the cavern, carving deep scars into the ancient stone walls. Lilaura's abyssal black flames coiled around her claws as she lunged forward with terrifying speed. Rimuru, unfazed, countered with a casual swing of his blade, his strike distorting the space itself. The moment their attacks collided, a deafening explosion rippled through the air, forcing both combatants to skid backward. Lilaura grinned, her golden eyes filled with unrestrained exhilaration. "You really are something else, Dragon Boy." Rimuru scoffed, spinning his blade. "And you're holding back, aren't you?" His crimson aura flared as he charged forward, slashing with ruthless precision. Lilaura ducked under the first swing, her body twisting unnaturally before she countered with a brutal uppercut. Flames exploded around her fist as she drove it toward Rimuru's jaw. Rimuru smirked. Void distortion. His form flickered, shifting slightly in space, and Lilaura's punch barely grazed him before his knee crashed into her gut. The impact sent her soaring through the air, slamming into the cavern wall with a thunderous crash. But she only laughed. "Not bad." Lilaura wiped a trickle of blood from her lips, her excitement growing. "But I hope you realize, a little pain just makes me want to fight more." Rimuru's eyes narrowed as Lilaura suddenly vanished from sight. Above, his instincts screamed as he tilted his head just in time to dodge a black flame-coated claw aimed at his neck. Lilaura had appeared above him in an instant, her body spinning as she delivered a devastating kick. Boom! Rimuru blocked, skidding backward, his boots grinding against the stone floor. His body absorbed the impact, his lips curling into a smirk. "That all?" Lilaura's grin widened. "You cocky little..." She didn't get to finish. Rimuru extended his hand, and the space around Lilaura twisted violently. An invisible force wrapped around her body, crushing down with enough pressure to obliterate mountains. Lilaura's eyes widened in shock, then she grinned. A heartbeat later, her aura surged, and she roared. The sheer force of her dragon's might shattered the space-locking power around her. With a flap of her wings, she launched forward, her claws cutting through the air like black lightning. Rimuru met her head-on. His katana glowed with crimson-black energy as he swung it at full force. Lilaura matched his ferocity with her abyssal flames. Boom! Their clash sent shockwaves tearing through the cavern, the very air screaming under the pressure. Meanwhile, Hajime and Belzar's battle reached its climax. Belzar was furious. His massive frame was bloodied, cracks forming along his once impenetrable armor. His crimson aura had turned darker, wilder, as his rage intensified. "You, worthless human," he roared, his voice carrying an almost demonic distortion. His fists clenched, and the ground beneath him shattered as he charged. Hajime's eyes gleamed with cold focus. His body ached, his magic reserves were dwindling, but he was far from done. As Belzar lunged forward, Hajime raised Schlagen and fired. Boom! The armor-piercing round screamed through the air, striking Belzar's shoulder and blowing off a chunk of flesh. But instead of slowing down, Belzar gritted his teeth and pushed through. With a monstrous backhand, he sent Hajime flying. Crash! Hajime crashed into a crumbling stone pillar, coughing up blood, but his hand never left his weapon. Belzar stomped forward, his crimson eyes burning with pure hatred. You dare wound me, a human like you." Hajime wiped blood from his lip and smirked. "What's wrong, tough guy? Thought you were supposed to be invincible." Belzar snarled and raised his fist, his aura surging. "Die." But before he could strike, a magic circle appeared beneath him. Both he and Lilaura suddenly froze as the summoning spell activated. Tisk! Lilaura clicked her tongue, stopping mid-attack. She glanced at the glowing circle and sighed. "It seems my master is calling me." Rimuru lowered his blade slightly, watching as the spell enveloped her. HMPH. Convenient timing. Lilaura grinned. "Before I go, tell me your name, Dragon Boy." Rimuru smirked. "Rimuru. Call me Demon Lord Rimuru." Lilaura's golden eyes widened slightly before she chuckled. "Demon Lord, huh? To tell you the truth, I once bore that title myself. Everyone around them froze. Kuki's mouth fell open. Demon Lord. Ryutaro clenched his fists. No way, Rimuru is. Kaori covered her mouth in shock. Daisuke took a step back, his face pale. That freak is a demon lord. Eri's eyes shone with eerie fascination. Suzu gulped. This is insane. Meanwhile, Lilora smirked. If we ever meet again, let's fight properly. I want to see how much you can grow against me. She sighed. Unfortunately, our time is up. Belzar, however, was furious. Unlike Lilora, who accepted the summoning, he resisted. No, I'm not done with you, human. He roared at Hajime, his aura flaring violently. I swear, I'll tear you apart next time. Hajime smirked, flipping his revolver in his hand. Hey, looking forward to it. The magic circle beneath Belzar glowed brighter, forcefully pulling him away. Lilora called out, pick up Catalya. Belzar turned, stepping toward Catalya's wounded body. But before he could reach her, he was teleported away. Lilora's eyes widened as she quickly dashed toward Catalya. But she was too late. A bright flash engulfed her form as well, and in an instant, she was gone. The battlefield fell silent. Catalya lay almost conscious on the ground, Rimuru, Hajime, and the others standing over her. The once violent battlefield was now eerily quiet. As the echoes of battle faded, the others could finally breathe. But the weight of what had just transpired settled heavily in their hearts. Kaori stood frozen, her hands trembling, her eyes darting between Hajime and Rimuru, struggling to comprehend what she had just witnessed. Kuki clenched his fists, his face contorted in disbelief and frustration. They fought monsters like that? His voice wavered. Ryotaru's normally jovial expression was absent, replaced with grim realization. That wasn't a fight. That was survival. He looked at Hajime and Rimuru, their exhausted figures walking toward them, bruised and bloodied. Daisuke, pale and shaken, took a step back. There's no way, that wasn't normal. He looked at Rimuru in fear. Suzu had tears in her eyes, overwhelmed. That was too much, that wasn't something a normal person could survive. Eri, however, was quiet. Her gaze locked onto Hajime, filled with something unreadable, admiration. Fascination. It was hard to tell. As Hajime and Rimuru finally approached the group, Hajime let out a heavy breath. Hajime wiped the sweat off his forehead, his expression unreadable. Damn it. If that fight had lasted just a few minutes longer. Rimuru chuckled darkly. We'd both be dead. His crimson eyes gleamed with amusement, but there was exhaustion beneath them. Hajime scoffed. Can't believe I actually had to admit that. Rimuru smirked. I was holding back, you know. Hajime gave him a sideways glance. Bullshit. Rimuru chuckled again but sighed, his expression growing more serious. Lilora and Belzar weren't just strong, they were monsters in every sense. Even with everything we had, they were still stronger than both of us. Hajime frowned. Yeah, if that summoning hadn't pulled them away. Rimuru shrugged. We would have died. The weight of that truth settled between them. For the first time, Hajime realized how close they had come to losing everything. Even Rimuru, despite all his overwhelming power, had been pushed to his limit. For a moment, there was silence. Then Hajime let out a tired chuckle. Hey, I guess we're still not strong enough. Rimuru smirked. Not yet. As Hajime and Rimuru finally stopped in front of the group, Kaori couldn't hold back anymore. She ran straight to Hajime, throwing herself at him. Hajime, she cried. I thought you were dead. I thought you'd never come back. Her arms tightened around him as she sobbed into his chest. I missed you so much. Hajime stiffened. He turned his head slightly, looking at Rimuru. Rimuru smirked, giving him a knowing look. Go on. Hajime sighed heavily. Damn it. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around Kaori. I'm here, Kaori, he murmured. I came back so Dawn, cry. Kaori sobbed harder, gripping his shirt as if afraid he'd disappear again. You idiot, she whispered. You were suffering all this time, weren't you? You didn't have to go through that alone. Hajime exhaled. Yeah, but I made it. That's all that matters now. Kaori only held him tighter. While the emotional reunion continued, Aurora, her purple hair flowing in the dim light, stepped forward. She gazed at Rimuru with respect, then bowed. Master. Rimuru raised an eyebrow. Oh, that's new. Aurora lifted her head, her crimson eyes filled with something close to warmth. Thank you. For what? Aurora's lips curled into a faint smile. For acknowledging me, as your subordinate. Rimuru blinked, then smirked. Ha, took you long enough to accept it. He patted her head gently. Go rest. You need it. Aurora blinked in surprise but didn't resist the head pat. A small sigh escaped her lips as she leaned into the touch slightly. Understood, she murmured before vanishing into Rimuru's shadow, along with Sheen. Daisuke hid behind Endo. Endo blinked. What are you doing? Daisuke hissed, shut up, you idiot. Endo sighed. Fine, at least thank me later. The atmosphere turned heavy as Hajime, Rimuru, and Kaori approached Ryutaro. He was kneeling, holding Rari's lifeless body. Suzu hesitated before speaking. Rimuru, Aurora said you can bring her back, right? Eri stepped forward, her gaze intense. Do it. Kaori turned to Rimuru, pleading. Please. Rimuru crossed his arms. And what do I get in return? The silence was deafening. Suzu's eyes widened. What? Eri clenched her fists. You won't do it unless there's something in it for you. Kaori flinched. Rimuru. Ryutaro lowered his head, his grip on Rari tightening. Endo looked down, unsure how to react. Daisuke stayed silent, still shaken. Kuki snapped. You monster. He shouted. His rage finally overflowed. A person just died, and all you can think about is what you get in return. How heartless can you be? You're not human. You're just some cold-blooded freak playing hero. Everyone fell silent. Rimuru sighed, rubbing his temples. TCH. If I don't do this, Shizuku is going to yell at me. He raised his hand, a white, pure, and red energy ball forming in his palm. A perfect balance between the three elements of life, huh? Rimuru muttered, examining the soul. Impressive. The energy drifted into Rari's body. A heartbeat passed. Then, she gasped, her eyes flying open. The entire group froze. Kaori covered her mouth in shock. Suzu's eyes filled with tears. Eri smiled. Ryutaro trembled. Rari blinked, disoriented. Ryutaro. The moment she spoke, Ryutaro pulled her into a crushing hug. Suzu sobbed. She's alive. Hajime crossed his arms, smirking. You never told us you could do that. Rimuru smirked back. I'm not gonna tell everyone what I can do, Hajime. Just like you. Hajime snorted. Hey, fair enough. Kuki, however, still glared at them, his anger refusing to fade. As the dust settled, Rimuru's gaze shifted toward Catalia. She sat there, unable to move, her body too weak to stand. Now, the only thing left to take care of is her. Hajime glanced at Rimuru. What are you going to do? Rimuru smirked. You'll see. Hajime followed as Rimuru approached Catalia, both of them standing over her. The air grew tense. As the battlefield grew silent, only the flickering embers of destruction remained. Blood and dust settled, marking the brutal end of their fight. Rimuru knelt in front of the defeated demon general, lifting her chin with an almost lazy curiosity. His crimson eyes met hers, a flicker of amusement dancing in them. Your name is Catalia, right? His voice was smooth, almost teasing. I must say, you're a breathtaking beauty. Catalia scoffed, her defiant red eyes glaring at him. Is that supposed to flatter me, monster? Before she could say more, Kaori's furious voice cut through the air. Rimuru, she shouted, fists clenched. What about Shizuku? Hajime nearly laughed but smirked instead. Oh, I am definitely telling her about this. Rimuru shot him a deadpan look. Don't you dare. Sighing, Rimuru turned back to Catalia, his expression losing its playfulness. Choose your fate, Catalia. Die here, or live as a prisoner for the rest of your life. Catalia chuckled darkly. As if you'd actually let me live. And even if you did, I'd rather die than be a prisoner of someone like you. Before Rimuru could respond, a groan sounded behind them. Meld, heavily injured but conscious, was being helped up by Ryutaro. Damn it, that was rough, Meld muttered, holding his side. With Ryutaru's support, he took unsteady steps toward Rimuru and Hajime. His gaze softened as he took in the sight of the survivors, Kaori, Suzu, Eri, Rari, Endo, and even the terrified Daisuke hiding behind Endo. Kuki followed behind them, his expression tense as he stared at Rimuru. Meld exhaled, then looked at the two strongest in the group. You two, you made it back. He smiled weakly. I'm glad. And, thank you. You saved them. Rimuru merely gave a small nod, while Hajime scoffed. TCH. It wasn't for free, old man. Kaori's attention remained locked on Catalya. This is pointless. She won't tell us anything. Rimuru, we should just. But Catalya suddenly chuckled darkly, her lips curling in amusement. Such a pure and disgusting sight, she spat, eyes burning with hatred. If it weren't for you two, I would have completed my mission by now. Damn it. Rimuru's eyes narrowed. Mission. Catalya smirked but remained silent. Hajime clicked his tongue. Figures. You won't reveal your master, will you? Silence. Rimuru sighed. Well, I gave you a choice. He stood up, and in one fluid motion, his demonic katana materialized in his grasp. Catalya didn't even flinch. Drawing your weapon won't get you anywhere, boy. She smirked condescendingly. I know your type. In the end, you can't kill someone just like a human. A sharp, piercing scream tore through the air. Catalya's eyes widened in horror as her arms were suddenly ripped from her body. Blood sprayed violently across the ground. The others recoiled in shock. Kaori gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Suzu covered her face, trembling. Reiri turned away, unable to look. Endo turned pale, while Daisuke let out a choked whimper. Ryotaro grimaced, fists clenched. Eri, however, her eyes gleamed with something unreadable, fascination? Satisfaction? Kuki was the first to react with outrage. Our Rimuru. That was unnecessary. He stepped forward, hands shaking. We could have interrogated her, there was no reason to. Rimuru ignored him entirely. He pressed his foot against Catalya's chest, forcing her to the ground. Who said I was like the others? Rimuru's voice was cold, devoid of mercy. Kuki's eyes widened. You monster. Before he could finish, Rimuru moved. With a single, swift motion. Rimuru tore Catalya's head off. The demon's expression froze in shock as her severed head tumbled to the ground. A heavy silence fell over the group. Kaori let out a horrified gasp, stumbling back. Suzu turned deathly pale. Eri's lips twitched, but whether in approval or unease was unclear. Kuki shook with rage. Why you didn't have to do that. Rimuru smirked coldly, tossing the severed head toward Kuki's feet. Did the hero say something? Rimuru's voice was mocking. I didn't hear anything. Kuki clenched his fists, face red with anger. Why that was murder. Rimuru shrugged. It was an execution. Kuki's jaw tightened. You're not a hero, you're a. I never claimed to be one. Rimuru sheathed his katana, stepping past the group. I'm leaving. Follow or not, it's your choice. Hajime, watching the entire exchange, let out a low whistle. Damn, you're even crueler than usual today. Rimuru smirked but didn't respond. Hajime exhaled, then turned to the others. We're moving. Let's go. Kaori hesitated, looking between Rimuru and the lifeless body of Catalya. Her stomach twisted with unease, but in the end, she followed. Suzu swallowed hard but nodded. Eri smiled faintly, hiding her amusement as she walked behind them. Reiri, Endo, and Ryotaro remained silent but moved. Daisuke had no choice but to follow. Only Kuki lingered, glaring at Rimuru's back. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath, but in the end, he followed, too. The cold silence stretched between them as they walked, the weight of Catalya's execution still pressing on the group. Rimuru and Hajime walked ahead, their movements unbothered, while Kaori hesitantly moved closer to Hajime. Suzu, Eri, and Reiri stayed by her side, whispering amongst themselves, while Ryotaro supported Meld, who was still injured. Endo and Daisuke trailed behind, their gazes flickering between each other in uncertainty. And then there was Kuki, his fists clenched, steps heavy, walking beside Rimuru, glaring daggers at him. You didn't have to kill her, Kuki finally spat, voice laced with anger. She was unarmed. Rimuru didn't even look at him. Instead, he chuckled darkly. Duh, I ripped her arms off. Kuki paled, but his fury didn't wane. That's not what I meant. You murdered her. An intelligent being with emotions, just like us. Hajime let out a dry chuckle. Intelligent or not, she was our enemy. If you wanted to die by her hand so badly, why didn't you just say so? We could have handed her a sword and let her kill you. Kuki's face twisted with rage. How dare you? I am the hero. Rimuru's smirk widened, his red eyes gleaming with amusement. And I am the demon lord. Hajime snorted. Actually, you're more like a dragon now, but yeah, whatever. Kuki gritted his teeth. You're still someone who was summoned with us. You have to obey me. Hajime's expression darkened, his eyes burning with barely restrained anger. Yeah, I obeyed you. That's why I almost died. Don't you dare bring that up. Kuki snapped. Rimuru suddenly stopped walking. Everyone froze. He slowly turned his head, and for a brief moment, the air itself seemed to freeze as his crimson eyes glowed with a haunting, almost inhuman light. His voice was low, slow, and carried an unshakable weight. Think before you speak, Kuki. A shiver ran down everyone's spine. Even Meld, a seasoned warrior, felt the sharp chill of dread creeping up his spine. I don't care if you're a hero, Rimuru continued, his tone unwavering. I don't care if you're a friend. If you stand against me, I will not hesitate to kill you. His words cut through the air like a blade. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. But then, Kuki's pride got the better of him. You bastard! He roared, lunging at Rimuru with his fist. The attack never landed. Rimuru caught Kuki's fist between two fingers. Effortlessly. Kuki's eyes widened in shock. And then, the cold touch of metal pressed against his skull. Hajime's gun. Hajime's voice was calm, almost bored. Try that one more time, and you'll get a bullet straight through your head. Kuki swallowed hard, his pride warring with his survival instinct. Rimuru finally released his grip, and Kuki staggered back, breathing heavily, his rage barely contained. But it wasn't just Kuki who was shaken. Meld, Ryutaro, Endo, even Hajime felt something deep within them stir. Fear. Not of Rimuru's power, but of his sheer, unshakable will. Even if it was Hajime standing in his way, Rimuru wouldn't hesitate. Without another word, Rimuru turned and continued walking. Hajime let out a slow breath, then followed. The others hesitated before trailing behind them. Kuki remained frozen in place for a long moment, staring at the spot where Rimuru had stood. Then, without another word, he followed, too. The group finally reached the dungeon's exit. Before them stood the massive, ancient doors, symbols of their struggle, their survival. Rimuru stepped forward, placing a hand on the door, and with a single push, the giant doors creaked open. As they stepped out into the open world, what greeted them was not relief. An army of soldiers lined up before them, weapons drawn, tense expressions painting their faces. Rimuru and Hajime sighed in unison. Before anything could be said, Rimuru took a step forward and released his aura. The air twisted violently. The world itself seemed to darken as a massive, otherworldly presence filled the battlefield. Black and purple energy erupted around him, and his body shimmered, shifting into something monstrous. A dragon. A creature of pure destruction and overwhelming dominance. The soldiers paled. Some dropped their weapons, others fell to their knees, unable to even breathe in his presence. Before panic could truly spread, a single figure stepped forward. The guild master. His expression was grim, yet his posture was composed as he faced Rimuru. Apologies, he said, his voice steady despite the suffocating pressure in the air. We thought monsters would be the ones emerging from that gate. He turned to his men. Stand down. Return to your posts. The soldiers, still trembling, hurriedly obeyed. Rimuru watched, his gaze unreadable, before finally nodding in acknowledgement. The guild master gave a final bow before walking away, leading his men with him. As the battlefield emptied, Hajime let out a slow breath. Well, that was a pain in the ass. Rimuru smirked, his crimson eyes still glowing faintly. You get used to it. The tense atmosphere following the encounter with the soldiers barely had time to settle before a high-pitched, joyful voice echoed through the air. Papa! Everyone turned, their eyes widening as a small girl, no older than 5, came running at full speed towards Hajime. Her blue hair shimmered under the light, her large, watery blue eyes sparkling with excitement as she practically launched herself into Hajime's arms. Hajime, for his part, caught her effortlessly and held her up with ease. A rare, genuine smile tugged at his lips as he gently ruffled her hair. "Hey, MYU. Papa's back." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the entire group. Kaori, Suzu, Eri, Rari, Ryotaro, Meld, Endo, and Daisuke all froze, their brains failing to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Papa? Did she just call him Papa? What the hell? Kuki looked like someone had just smacked him over the head with a club, his jaw hanging open in pure disbelief. Before anyone could recover, 3 women approached with confident strides. Yu was the first, her golden eyes locking onto Hajime with quiet intensity. "Finally. What took you so long?" Shay pouted, her large bunny ears twitching as she hurried up to them. "Yeah, we were so worried about you." And then, there was Tio. The dragon woman let out a sensual sigh, placing a hand on her cheek as she eyed Hajime with a gaze that practically dripped with lust. "Indeed, young master. I have been awaiting your return most eagerly. My body aches for your presence. Ah, to think I would be left neglected for so long. Perhaps you might punish me accordingly?" A heavy silence followed. The entire group, who looked like he was struggling to contain laughter, stared at the 3 women with varying degrees of disbelief, horror, and embarrassment. Kaori, especially, looked like she had just been struck by lightning. Wait. Kaori finally burst out, pointing an accusing finger at Hajime. Who are they? And why is that woman acting like a pervert? Suzu supplied helpfully, still blinking in shock. Tio let out a throaty chuckle. Ufufufu, I am but a humble dragon who has sworn her body and soul to my master and young master. My desires are merely an expression of my boundless devotion. Meld choked on air. What the hell did I just hear? Kaori shook her head, forcing herself to focus. And no, more importantly, Hajime, her eyes locked onto MYU, who was still clinging to Hajime's neck. Did she just call you Papa? Hajime blinked at her, then nodded casually. Yeah, why? Kaori took a deep breath. Then, without warning, she grabbed Hajime by the collar and started shaking him violently. Who is her mother? Hajime sighed, letting her shake him for a few seconds before answering dryly. No one here, she's adopted. Kaori instantly stilled. Oh. Then she realized she was still gripping Hajime's collar, and before she could release him, Yu's delicate hand reached out and slapped her own away. Release Hajime. Now. Yu's voice was calm, but the weight behind it made Kaori instinctively step back. Kaori looked between Hajime and the 3 women surrounding him, her expression conflicted. So tell me, who's the real mother? Before Hajime could respond, Shay bounced up to his side, looking at Kaori curiously. Is she your friend, Hajime? Kaori stiffened, suddenly feeling an overwhelming pressure as Yu, Shay, and Tio all turned their full attention onto her. Ryotaro, meanwhile, was still struggling to process everything. Okay, hold up. First, Hajime survived the abyss. Then, he came back a total badass. And now he has women fighting over him. What kind of isekai power trip is this? Daisuke looked ready to faint. How is this happening? Eri and Rari exchanged glances, both seeming mildly impressed yet deeply confused. Kuki, on the other hand, looked like he had been betrayed in the worst way possible. His fists clenched at his sides as he glared at Hajime. You're just some weak otaku. How the hell did you get all these women? Hajime shot him a dry look. Survival of the fittest. Adapt or die. Before the shock of MYU calling Hajime Papa could even settle, another high-pitched voice cut through the air. Daddy. A blur of white and red shot past the group, barreling straight toward Rimuru. A little girl, no older than 5, practically flew into his arms. Her pure white hair shimmered like silk, and her large, ruby-red eyes gleamed with joy as she latched onto Rimuru like a koala. Rimuru, who had been casually observing Hajime's predicament with amusement, suddenly found himself attacked by a ball of fluff. He barely had time to react before his arms instinctively wrapped around her. How is my little princess? Rimuru stammered, trying to maintain his usual arrogant composure while awkwardly cradling the tiny girl. The entire group, who was still reeling from the first shock, now froze once more. Kaori, Suzu, Eri, Reri, Ryutaro, Daisuke, Meld, Kuki. What? The collective scream echoed through the air. Kaori looked like she was about to faint. T2. First, Hajime has a child calling him Papa, and now. Rimuru. Suzu gasped dramatically. Rimuru-kun, how could you hide such an adorable child from us? Eri narrowed her eyes. Wait, did he? Daisuke, still recovering from the shock of Hajime's situation, pointed a shaking finger at Rimuru. There's no way. How? When? Who? Kuki, meanwhile, was barely holding himself together. His expression twitched violently as his eyes darted between Hajime, Rimuru, Myu, and Lilith. His jaw clenched. His fists tightened. His very soul was screaming. Why do these two have daughters and I don't even have a girlfriend? Before he could explode, two figures emerged from the distance, approaching with purposeful strides. Shizuku sighed, shaking her head. She ran off the moment she saw you. Elena, her arms crossed, gave Rimuru a pointed look as she walked beside Shizuku. We were worried, you know. Both women stopped in front of Rimuru, standing closer than what most would consider normal. The tension in the air shifted. Kaori blinked. Wait, Shizuku. Shizuku turned to her old friend and smiled. Hey, Kaori. Kaori was still processing everything. First, Hajime had women around him, and now Rimuru had two standing beside him like. Elena tilted her head. Who's she? Shizuku hummed, looking at Kaori before back at Elena. An old friend. Elena smirked. Oh, another admirer of your daddy, here. Rimuru nearly choked. Oi, don't start that. Shizuku, however, ignored him and turned to Lilith. Lilith, why did you run off like that? Lilith, still in Rimuru's arms, pouted. Daddy took too long. I missed him. Rimuru softened instantly, rubbing her head affectionately. My little princess missed me, huh? Lilith beamed. But, she suddenly glanced at Elena and Shizuku, looking somewhat thoughtful. Rimuru raised a brow. What's wrong? Elena sighed, placing a hand on her hip. We explained to her that if she keeps hogging all your attention, you might get mad one day. So, she decided to be a good girl and share. Lilith nodded enthusiastically. Yup, I don't want daddy to be mad. So, I'll share him with mommy Elena and mommy Shizuku. Silence. Meld choked. Mommy. Ryutaru's brain short-circuited. Wait, hold up. Kaori's jaw dropped. Shizuku. Suzu gasped. Shizuku, you're a mom. Daisuke twitched. This isn't fair. It's not fair. Reri and Eri exchanged a look of absolute disbelief. Kuki, meanwhile, reached his breaking point. What is going on? He roared, finally snapping. First, Hajime comes back stronger, has women, and now a kid calling him Papa. Then Rimuru, who was just as much of a loser as Hajime, now has women calling themselves mommy. And a child calling him daddy. What kind of sick joke is this? The group flinched at his outburst, but Hajime and Rimuru merely exchanged a glance. Hajime sighed. Survival of the fittest. Adapt or die. Rimuru smirked. Can't keep up, hero. Kuki gritted his teeth, seething. This isn't fair. Shizuku, listen to me. You don't have to stay with him. He's a murderer. Come with us. Shizuku's expression didn't even waver. Instead, she calmly met Kuki's gaze and said, no. Kuki flinched. Shizuku. He's killed intelligent beings like us. How can you stand beside him? Shizuku's eyes hardened. And, Kuki froze. What? Shizuku took a step forward. I've killed two, Kuki. Not just intelligent beings. Humans. Dead silence. The color drained from Kuki's face. Meld tensed. Suzu and Kaori paled. Ryutaro swallowed hard. Hajime smirked. Still feeling righteous, hero. Kuki's fists trembled. His world was falling apart. Meanwhile, Lilith, completely unbothered by the tension, looked at Myu curiously. Sister Myu, is this? Myu tilted her head. Quote. Lilith nodded. Myu suddenly gasped. Does that mean, we have? Lilith blinked. Then she smiled brightly. Yup. That means we both have awesome daddies and pretty mommies. Yay. Myu cheered, clapping her hands. Sisters group. You smiled faintly. So cute. Shay giggled. Right. I wanna squeeze them. Tio sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her cheek. Ah, young master, I do believe we should expand our family as well. Hajime deadpanned. Shut up. Tio shuddered. Ah, that commanding tone, more, please. Everyone. Rimuru, ignoring the chaos, nodded in satisfaction. Yup, Lilith is a good girl. She understands perfectly. Elena smirked. Yup, no problems between mommies and Lilith, right? Lilith nodded proudly. Daddy is silly, so I have to help take care of him. Rimuru twitched. I am not silly. Lilith giggled. Yes, you are. Hajime snorted. She's got you there. Shizuku subtly leaned toward Kaori, whispering softly, this is the perfect time to confess to Hajime. Kaori's face turned crimson. It's harder than it looks. Shizuku sighed, giving her a nudge. That's why I'm saying you have to do it now, or you'll regret it later. Kaori gulped, then nodded with determination. I'll try. Before she could gather her courage, Rimuru's voice rang out. What's my little dragoness whispering about? He smirked, tilting his head toward Shizuku. Shizuku instantly straightened, schooling her expression into neutrality. Nothing. Just girl talk. Elena, who had been watching with amusement, smirked. Oh, I'm sure it was something important. Rimuru chuckled. I heard that, by the way. Shizuku crossed her arms, unimpressed. Good. But let's keep it a secret. She shot a final encouraging smile at Kaori before gracefully returning to Rimuru's side, linking her arm with his. Elena did the same on the other side, effectively sandwiching Rimuru between them. It was at this moment that Suzu, still trying to process everything, decided to ask the one question on everyone's mind. Rimuru-kun, who's Lilith's mother? Silence. The air grew thick with anticipation. All eyes were locked onto Rimuru and Lilith. Shizuku and Elena exchanged a knowing glance before both nodded. Then, with a victorious smirk, Shizuku hugged Rimuru's arm and declared, I'm Lilith's mother. Kuki's entire world shattered. What? Suzu gasped, hands flying to her mouth. No way. Shizuku. You. Eri and Rari looked absolutely stunned, their brains failing to compute. Ryutaro blinked. Hold on, how is that possible? You've only been gone for 4 months. Shouldn't it be, 9? Shizuku grinned. Dragons are different. Rimuru immediately realized what Shizuku was doing and smirked. He noticed Hajime, Shay, and Tio exchanging knowing glances as well. They all decided to roll with it. Elena joined in, nodding sagely. Yes, dragons are unique beings. Our gestation period is much faster than humans. Kuki's hands trembled. Dragons. Shizuku smirked. Yup. Rimuru, Lilith, Elena, and I have evolved into dragonoids. Kaori's brain nearly short-circuited. Wait, then that means, you're not lying. Shizuku nodded proudly. That's right. Rimuru playfully ruffled Lilith's hair. She's got my blood. My little princess is a dragonoid. Lilith puffed out her chest proudly. I'm Daddy's special dragon princess. Kuki snapped. No. This is insane. This isn't fair. First Hajime, now Rimuru. Shizuku, you're lying. You were normal before. You can't just become a dragon and have a child in 4 months. Shizuku grinned. Cope. Kuki screamed in pure frustration. As Kuki was seething, Myu suddenly tugged on Hajime's sleeve. Papa, I'm hungry. Lilith, who was still clinging to Rimuru, perked up. Daddy, I'm hungry too. Rimuru, who had just moments ago been exuding the aura of a cold-hearted, battle-crazed warrior, immediately melted. Oh no, my little princess is hungry. This is a disaster. He dramatically kneeled, clutching Lilith's hands. Tell Daddy what you want. I'll get it for you right away. Lilith giggled. I want something sweet. Kuki's eye twitched violently. This can't be the same Rimuru that was slaughtering monsters like a battle maniac earlier. Ryutaro, Meld, and the others also gawked at the absurd contrast. Suzu's lips trembled. He's so doting. Eri looked like she had been spiritually shattered. I don't understand this man at all. Rari nodded numbly. He was terrifying before, but now he's acting like a complete fool. Meanwhile, Rimuru was rubbing his chin in deep thought. Something sweet, huh? I know. He flicked his wrist, summoning a tray of beautifully crafted desserts. Here you go. Daddy's special magical sweets, infused with love. Lilith's eyes sparkled. Yay. Thank you, Daddy. She took a bite and made a blissful expression. It's the best. Myu, not wanting to be left behind, turned to Hajime. Papa, can I have some too? Hajime smirked and handed her a piece. Of course. As Myu and Lilith happily ate, Yu, Shay, and Tio watched with amused expressions. Tio smirked. Young master, isn't it delightful? A man's virility is best proven by the love he showers upon his offspring. Ah, young master, when will you give me a child? Hajime deadpanned. Never. Tio shuddered in pleasure. Ah, such cruelty. But it only makes me want you more. Rimuru snorted. She's still a lost cause. Tio suddenly turned to him. Oh, but Master Rimuru, wouldn't you enjoy adding another devoted servant to your collection? I am quite skilled at. Shizuku flicked Tio's forehead. No. Elena smirked. Definitely no. Tio pouted. You're both so mean. Suzu clutched her chest, overwhelmed by the absurdity. This is too much. I can't keep up. Kaori, who had been stealing herself, suddenly took a deep breath. She clenched her fists. She gathered all her courage. Then, she called out. Hajime. Wait. Hajime stopped, turning to look at her. Kaori's heart pounded. I have something to tell you. The entire group fell silent, watching with interest. Rimuru smirked, Shizuku crossed her arms, and Elena raised an eyebrow in amusement. Even Lilith and Myu perked up. Kaori steeled herself, exhaling sharply before declaring. Hajime, I love you. Silence. A heavy pause filled the air. She did it. She finally said it. Hajime sighed, his gaze softening slightly. Kaori, I'm sorry, but my heart belongs to two women already. Kaori's breath hitched. Is it you and Shay? Hajime nodded without hesitation. Yeah. Kaori bit her lip, fighting back the sadness. Then, she clenched her fists even tighter and looked Hajime dead in the eye. It doesn't matter. Hajime blinked. What? Kaori took a determined step forward. I'll somehow win a place in your heart too. So let me come with you. Hajime's expression tightened. Kaori, I'm absolutely coming with you. Kaori cut him off before he could refuse. Hajime opened his mouth to argue, but before he could. I think it's fine, you suddenly said, her golden eyes assessing Kaori. Shay nodded eagerly. Yup, if she wants to be a rival, I welcome her challenge. Kaori's eyes sparkled with determination. Then it's settled. Hajime facepalmed. Why are you two encouraging this? Rimuru, who had been watching this whole exchange with growing amusement, suddenly clapped his hands. Great. Now that that's settled, can we go? Shizuku and Elena exchanged looks before both smirked. I swear, every time we stop somewhere, we end up picking up another girl, Shizuku muttered. Elena chuckled. What's one more? Hajime sighed, then finally nodded. Fine. Let's go. Kaori beamed. Yu and Shay smirked, eager for their new competition. Suddenly, Myu tugged on Hajime's sleeve, looking up at Kaori with wide eyes. Yay! We get another big sister. Big sis Kaori. Lilith, still in Rimuru's arms, tilted her head before calling out, Auntie Kaori. Kaori froze. Wait, Auntie. Lilith nodded innocently. You're old like Auntie Tio. Kaori staggered back like she had been struck. Oh, old. Tio gasped dramatically, placing a hand on her chest. How cruel, I am still in my prime, Fufu. Kaori looked like she wanted to argue, but before she could. Kaori, stop. Kuki's desperate voice rang out as he stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. You can't go with them. This isn't right, Rimuru is dangerous. Hajime is dangerous. You're supposed to be with us, with me. Kaori's expression hardened. No, Kuki. I've made my choice. Kuki clenched his fists. This is insane. They're turning you against your friends, against your duty as a hero's companion. Kaori shook her head. No, Kuki. I'm following my heart. Kuki gritted his teeth. Then I'll stop you by force. He charged forward, his sword aimed at Rimuru. The others gasped. Kuki, no! Ryotaro shouted. Meld and Endo tried to intervene, but it was too late. The sword swung down. Clang, it never reached Rimuru. A gust of wind swept through the battlefield as Kuki's attack was halted mid-air. His blade trembled against an unseen force. Then, a figure appeared in front of Rimuru, a beautiful woman with long, deep violet hair and piercing purple eyes. She wore a dark, regal outfit, her presence exuding overwhelming dominance. Kuki's eyes widened. Before he could finish. Boom! The woman delivered a brutal punch to Kuki's stomach, sending him flying across the battlefield. He crashed into the ground, coughing violently. The woman, her crimson gaze filled with cold, turned toward him. "Do not lay a hand on my master." Everyone froze. Rimuru raised an eyebrow. "Aurora?" The woman, Aurora, glanced back at him, her expression softening slightly. "Apologies, master." Kuki groaned, clutching his stomach as he struggled to stand. "Demon, you damn demon." Aurora's eyes darkened. "Yes, I am." She stepped forward, her aura suffocating. "If you ever try to harm my master or anyone he cares about again, I will personally erase your existence." Her voice carried such overwhelming authority that even Meld and the others shuddered. Kuki trembled, sweat pouring down his face. "Why, you're lying." Aurora smiled coldly. "Try me." Then, without another word, she vanished into thin air. Silence. Absolute silence. Ryotaro, Suzu, Eri, Rari, and Meld stared, completely dumbfounded. Endo wiped the sweat from his forehead. That was terrifying. Suzu gulped. Just how powerful are those two brothers? Eri shuddered. They both have daughters. They both have insane power. And they both attract women like crazy. Rari nodded slowly. It's unnatural. Ryotaro sighed. Remind me to never piss them off. As they were processing everything, Rimuru smirked, casually ruffling Lilith's hair. All right, let's go. Lilith cheered. Yay. Daddy's the best. Kaori, still recovering from the anti-comment, sighed. Meanwhile, Tio suddenly pressed herself against Hajime. Ah, young master, do you think I would make a good mother for our future children? Hajime deadpanned. Nope, Tio shuddered in pleasure. Ah, such rejection, but it makes me want you more. Rimuru snorted. Still hopeless. Tio turned to him with a sly smirk. Master Rimuru, surely you'd be interested in. Shizuku and Elena immediately grabbed Tio by the shoulders. No, absolutely not. Tio pouted. You two are so cruel. As the group finally turned to leave, Myu waved happily. Yay! We got another big sis. Lilith followed suit. And another auntie. Kaori groaned. Can we stop calling me old? Hajime sighed. Yu and Shay smirked at their new rival. And Rimuru, ever the foolish father, happily spoiled Lilith as they walked toward their next adventure. == TOB continued ==